Divine Intervention. By Orthoris. Chapter 14. Final Destination. Part 1 of 4. Pre-chapter author's note. Due to this chapter being the climax of the story, I made it slightly longer, so that you can enjoy the whole thing without awkward breaks or cliffhangers. Please read the note at the end for more information on a few things happening in this chapter, as well as the future of this story. Now, without further ado, please enjoy. End pre-chapter author's note. Asterisk. Atlas awoke softly, the first thing reaching his ears a cacophony of sounds coming from the sole window occupying his room. The sound was reassuring, as it implied that ponies had diligently continued to work while he retreated for some well-earned rest. He took a few deep breaths and let the world be for a few seconds longer before opening his eyes and moving to get up from his comfortable bed. As soon as his hooves connected to the crystalline floor, a slight feeling of anxiousness threatened to take over. A feeling that was wrestled down as quickly as it came. After stretching his limbs to get the blood flowing through them properly, he trotted over to the window to see what was going on outside. The window conveniently faced the field where the array was located, providing him with a position where he could easily overlook the whole thing. Ponies of all shapes, sizes, and colors flitted all over the place, setting up monoconductors at extremely specified positions along the runes. Others seemed to be gathered around tables which contained unfurled scrolls that showed them the details of what they were working on, and in the center of the multicolored maelstrom of ponies was a solitary blue speck. Luna commanded the small battalion from the center of the array, unmoving amidst a stream of activity. She was practically surrounded by floating scrolls and books, barking out orders for her little lemmings to follow, and they did as their princess bid. A smile appeared on Atlas's face as he took a few moments to simply watch, trying to banish the feeling trying to make itself known in the back of his head. Being nervous would do nobody any good today, for today was where everything finally went down. 11 days ago Atlas had met with the top mages the country had, and for the 11 days thereafter, all of them had worked themselves to the bone for him. The activation of the array was now mere hours away, and every pony seemed to be in hyper-mega overdrive as they went over last-minute preparations. All of them, except for Atlas. Seeing as today was the day where they either rang in a new era for pony kind or ended up as less than dust in the wind, it was universally agreed upon that Atlas would have to rest up properly in preparation for the event. Since all of the burden rested on his shoulders for actually casting all the spells required to activate the array, having him in anything short of peak condition was deemed unthinkable. Taking his eyes off the busy anthill below him, Atlas turned around, intent on getting some food into his belly. Luna had practically forbidden him from lifting so much as a hoof to help until it was finally time, going so far as to threaten to magically tie him down somewhere and slash or rolling him up in a rug should he not comply. A notion seconded by her traitorous sister which had arrived 2 days ago. Breaking out of their spells would not have been hard, but he got the point and didn't want to waste even a single bit of mana, lest he'd be short by one in the end. Thinking about it, he should really stop the ponies outside from using up too much of theirs. Smirking an evil smirk, as evil ponies do, he sent out a small magical shockwave. The actual spell took barely any effort or mana to cast, and had an effective range of merely a few feet. What was amusing about it was that it caused a chain reaction all around the point of origin, displacing the mana in the air and causing it to vibrate in a way mana really shouldn't. Similar to dominoes falling over, the reaction went for quite a way, give or take a mile. Funnily enough, this caused unicorn horns to tingle. The unexpected sensation was enough to make most unicorns drop the spells they were casting. It only applied to spells that were performed with minimal mental effort, though, which usually meant levitation. He could hear numerous yelps from outside as he passed the halls on his way to breakfast, causing him to chuckle. Even if it was a bit mean-spirited, there was no doubt in his mind that Luna would get the hint and make sure that magic use was cut down to a minimum from this point onwards, but just to make sure he sent a short mental message, alongside an apology, to confirm. The minuscule amounts of mana he just used would be replenished within the hour. He finally arrived at the dining room closest to his room, strolling over to the nearest seat available as a maid already approached him, ready to take whatever order he had. The room was completely empty, save for the two. Every pony else was currently out and about going after their own tasks. "Good morning, Lord Atlas," the maid addressed him. "How may I serve you today?" Atlas grumbled a bit when he was addressed as Lord. Celestia had pulled a sneaky on him and added to his already existing titles at some point, and it annoyed him to no end. He didn't know what titles he held by now, only that he didn't want any of them. Yet, making the life of a simple maid difficult by going off on a rant would help no pony. "Just some cheese sandwiches and a glass of apple juice if you don't mind," Atlas replied. Certainly, the maid didn't waste any time, bowing curtly and excusing herself through another door, most likely leading towards the kitchens. Atlas didn't pay her much mind, his thoughts instead lingering on the task at hand. At this point he had done all he could, really, and all that was left for him to do was cast the spell and hope for the best. There was not a single shred of doubt in him about whether or not the spell would work. Luna and him had checked the array again and again to the point of exhaustion, and it was truly flawless. The only uncertainty at this point was the ridiculous amount of mana needed to power a spell of such magnitude. According to the calculations, it should barely be enough. But seeing as these calculations relied mostly on guesswork and estimations, they had to be taken with a grain of salt. The maid returned in short order with a plate holding his breakfast of choice, which Atlas accepted thankfully, before retreating towards the door again, ready to be called at a moment's notice. Atlas bit into his first sandwich, sighing inwardly. He should have specified that he wanted mayonnaise instead of butter, but it's not like this was the end of the world. Atlas chuckled dryly at his dumb sense of humor and continued eating at a leisurely pace while mentally going over his to-do list. Luna and Celestia may have forbidden him from working, but that didn't mean he couldn't thoroughly prepare himself. He would go back to his study after finishing his breakfast and go over the spells he would need to cast. After that he would make the rounds for one final check of everything. Satisfied with his plan of action, he started on his second sandwich. Atlas watched as various ponies filed into the meeting room he currently occupied. He was sitting at the head of the table, a blackboard behind him, chock full of notes with barely any space left to write on. The first to enter were the various princesses of Equestria, with Luna and Celestia moving to take up their seats on either side of him, Cadence and Twilight not far behind. The rest of the table was split between the elements of harmony on one side and the strongest mages on the other, while Captain Shining Armor took up position next to the door. Once everyone was seated and greeted, Atlas begun the meeting. "I know I already checked earlier, and everything seemed to be going smoothly, but just to be sure, what's our status?" "We have completed everything in an orderly fashion and triple-checked everything, at the very least," Luna answered, shuffling through a huge pile of papers in front of her while checking for everything she might have missed. "The citizens are currently being herded towards the array and their assigned positions in preparation for the spell, and the task should be finished on time as well." "Good," Atlas closed his eyes and nodded, breathing a sigh of relief. He took a moment to fight down the funny feeling in his stomach before opening them again, looking over the ponies who had helped him so much. "First off, I'd like to thank every pony here for their hard work and help. Each and every one of us has given this project all they got and then some, in order to see it come to fruition. I think it's no secret that I never wanted to drag any pony else into this mess, so seeing all of you step forward so willingly and help, really means a lot to me. In just under an hour, I'll start casting the spell that will decide our fate, and I just want you to know, regardless of the outcome, that it was an honor having met all of you. Even if I might come over as pessimistic sometimes, I don't want to do something stupid like saying goodbye just in case. I believe that we'll pull this off and be able to enjoy a humongous party that Pinky no doubt will throw for us." The Pink Party pony nodded fervently. "I'm also not one for big speeches, so I'll cut this short. We've all done what could be done, so I want you all to enjoy some well-earned rest before we begin. Thanks again for all your help, and I'll see you outside later." The room was filled with a subdued cheer, followed by every pony present acknowledging Atlas's words and thanking him in turn. Not wanting to waste any time, the mages filed out of the room first, which prompted every pony else to leave as well, until only Atlas, Celestia, and Luna remained in their respective seats. "Father," Celestia spoke after a few silent moments. "How do you feel?" Atlas looked at the table in front of him while contemplating the question. "I'm nervous," he answered slowly. "I might put on a show of confidence before every pony, but the truth is, I really have no clue whether this will work or not. In theory, everything is fine, but there's just no absolute way of knowing if we'll be able to gather enough mana to properly power the array. It's a close shave no matter how you look at it." Atlas spilled his thoughts out now that they were in private. He was reluctant to let Ennipony know just how nerve-wracking this all was for him, but if he could tell Ennipony at all, it was his family. For a second everything was still, before he heard shuffling to either side of him, finding himself in the loving embrace of his daughters shortly thereafter. "You're not alone," Celestia whispered to his left. "We're all here for you, no matter what." "We'll always be," Luna added from his right. "No matter where you go." "For what it's worth, I'm also here." A tiny discord appeared in Atlas' mane and hugged his horn. "You know I'd never leave you hanging." Atlas chuckled at Disord's antics while he could feel some of his anxiousness melt out of him. The embrace he found himself in was warm, in more ways than one, causing him to relax just a little bit. He let his guard down because he felt he could do so without causing Ennipony to worry or judge him. He might have told himself time and time again that this was something he had to do alone, yet here he was. This whole plane of existence existed because of him, and now it faced total annihilation because of a tiny mistake Atlas once made. He fought alone to get to this point, using the ponies around him to further his plans. But now that everything came crashing down on him, his new family was there to reassure him that he was anything but alone. They remained there until it was almost time to leave, and in the presence of the ones he loved, Atlas found the place where he belonged. Asterisk. Zeus stared at the figure in front of him with a scowl. The lightning bolt he summoned illuminated the surroundings nicely so he got a good look at Hermes' face. There seemed to be equal parts sadness and smugness present on it, which resulted in a rather impressive facial expression. "Oh, I'm not confident at all," Hermes waved Zeus's statement away. "After all, you're king of the gods, the Allfather, the almighty Zeus. How could a lowly god, such as I, possibly hope to meet you in battle and do anything aside from perish?" Taken back by Hermes' statement, Zeus lowered the bolt in his hand, but didn't quite dispel it yet. He expected a fight and all he got was a god that wasn't even on guard against him, almost as if he wouldn't even try to defend himself, should he be attacked. Furrowing his brows he took one step forward, gouging Hermes' reaction. "What is your deal?" Zeus asked skeptically after a small smile appeared on Hermes' face. "Are you going to stop me or not?" "Oh no," Hermes shook his head. "I wouldn't think of standing in the way of your glorious plan." "By all means," Hermes took a step to the side and made an inviting gesture towards Atlas's prison. "Go ahead." Zeus was still on edge, but time was of the essence here and he couldn't waste any more of it by talking to this idiot. He carefully started moving towards the prison, making sure to not leave Hermes' ever-smiling figure out of his eyes. It didn't take long for him to reach his destination, so he held out his hand above the sphere held by the miniature Atlas, once again looking for any reaction from Hermes. Seeing that Hermes hadn't done anything yet, aside from lean against the marble pillar behind him, Zeus took the plunge and set his hand on the sphere, giving the mental command to activate the inscribed array at the same time. He was prepared to feel power rush through him, which would undoubtedly be accompanied by copious amounts of pain, a byproduct of forcefully fusing two powerful souls. What he wasn't prepared for, was the contraption below him to crumble into dust, so he stumbled as his weight wasn't caught and his hand fell straight down into the table. A look of confusion and shock crossed his face before being replaced with anger almost immediately. "What is the meaning of this?" Zeus bellowed towards the still smiling Hermes. What did you do? Oh, nothing much. Hermes gestured towards the massive table as hundreds of identical-looking statues appeared on it, some even sitting in the chairs. I might have made a few fakes of the prison, though. I must admit they look quite convincing. Zeus's right eye twitched as he looked at the statues overflowing on the nearly 30-foot-long table. Filled with anger, he swiped at the closest one, only to have it turn to dust as well. He tried a few times more, turning whole swaths of statues to nothing as he simply swiped his arms over the table only to come up empty. Stop this trickery at once! Zeus shouted with bulging veins around his neck. I don't have time to play your games, Hermes. Where would be the fun in that? Hermes chuckled. I assure you, the original is hidden somewhere in here, as I'm sure you can tell, since you've got that stupid tracking spell on it. I bet you regret not making it more accurate, don't you? Enough! Zeus cried and summoned another lightning bolt, launching it straight at Hermes before he could even react. The resulting explosion shook the whole room and only left behind a crater where once a proud pillar stood. A valiant try, I give you that, Hermes' voice said behind Zeus. But I'm actually over here. Shouting out his frustration, Zeus turned around and immediately launched another bolt at Hermes. You know, another bolt crashed into Hermes, who reappeared somewhere else. You really need to work on your temper, another bolt hit. It's not healthy to be angry all the time, another explosion. Zeus stood at the head of the table, his breath heavy from anger. His eyes were scanning the whole room for Hermes' form. Dispelling his illusions would be easy enough if he just knocked out his adversary, and at this point he didn't care if Hermes died or not. He had betrayed him after all. As he searched, Hermes stepped out from behind a still-standing marble pillar, but to add injury to insult, multiple copies of the god emerged from every pillar in the room. You know, you might be a lot faster than Hades, Hermes' voice rang out from all around Zeus. But as we're talking, he is making his way here, and once he does, you lose. And every second you waste with me, is a second we get closer to winning. One of the Hermes copies sat in a chair before Zeus and idly turned one of the statues over in his hand, admiring the craftsmanship. A furious cry rang out before several explosions rocked the room as Zeus eliminated both copies of Hermes and statues in droves and about to find the original of either. He knew time was running short and he needed to find the statue soon, or he would be in serious trouble. While this was happening, Hades ran towards the palace as fast as he could. The explosions he heard coming from it lightening his mood all the way, as he knew the plan they had concocted was working. **** End of Part 1.